All right, we back in here. We back in here. Part two. So I give people a moment to come back in. So I wait about 1 minute. And again, don't worry about the lighting. Don't worry about anything. Again, I'm just sitting outside, so we ain't. Again, we ain't gonna focus on none of that. Just listen to the words, right? Now, the reason I wanted to really do this video, right? And again, if you're gonna watch the playback of this, you're gonna be seeing this like 12, 14 hours later because you know how YouTube is. But we're gonna work through all that. I had a very profound experience, and I've been having profound experiences. I've been having some profound experiences, unlike anything else I've ever experienced. And it's because I don't even sleep no more. Like this is how deep this shit has been getting. I don't even sleep anymore. I cannot remember the last time I've been asleep. I can't remember the last time I've been up. I've been up. I don't even have to sleep anymore. Cause I remember hearing this shit. I remember reading this shit about yogis. Like they don't sleep. Yogis don't dream because they don't need it. It's like they're able to train their body and they don't even need sleep. It's only been something that I heard. I never thought it was actually possible until I came out into these streets and I learned better. I had to learn better, right? So in the course of me not sleeping, I cannot remember the last time I lost consciousness. My consciousness has been consistent. So even if I lay down, I go directly into dream mode. Then I come directly out of dream mode and I'm right back. It's like my consciousness has not broke. There has not been a point of blackness for I don't know how long. Because I felt I had to take it to the next level. I'm like, all right, I'm tired of doing this little soft shit. I'm tired of, just pretending like I can't do more, like I can't push myself harder, like I can't go further. So let me see how hard I really am. Let me see how tough I really am. Let's see how much I really can endure and what actually happens if I push myself beyond the limits that I thought that I had. All limits that I thought I had have been transcended. I have transcended. I had to fast for 3 days. So let me take you through the journey. I had to fast 3 days. So for 3 days, it may have been 4 days because I wasn't even keeping track like that because it didn't even matter to me. I didn't really have a time limit. I just wanted to see how long I can do it. So I wasn't like, okay, it's this many hours, it's this many days. I wasn't even, so I really don't know how long it was. So we'd just say 3, 4 days, right? So I didn't eat anything. So I began to get clarity. Also, I haven't did any type of substances, any weed, nothing. I'm like none of that. I'm completely sober, and I've been sober. I don't know how fucking long. So this is me completely sober. I don't know when the last time I took a puff of anything, right? I haven't been no substances, none of that, right? The world is different. The world is really different at this point. Like I see things completely different, and it wasn't a challenge in the sense of it used to be times where I felt like, oh, like, why would I ever be sober? You know what I mean? I like the feeling of, going into the unconscious mind. When you smoke, you go to the land of the dead. Of course, I want to work with dead spirits, necromancy, so on and so forth, right? But I just been out in nature. I've been absorbing the chi from nature. And because I've been absorbing the chi from nature, I realized that I don't even need anything else, which was a surprise to me. Again, this was not my intention. This is just what happened along the way. So I realized like, oh, I really don't need any other stimulant. I don't need stimulants. I don't need substances. I don't need food. I don't need drink. I don't need any of these things, right? It's like I've been fooling myself to think I do. But then I realized I'm like, oh, it's because we are inside of the home too much and too long. Let me give you an example of what I mean. It's like if you're in a house all day or just inside anywhere, whether you're at the job, you're inside of any type of building, what happens is we're surrounded by positive ions, right? Whenever you are inside a building, you're surrounded by positive ions. Whenever you go outside, you are surrounded by negative ions. That's why, like, even if you're sick, the moment you step outside, you begin to feel better because it's a shift of energy. So I came to the realization, what happens if you continuously charge yourself up with these negative ions? And again, I may be switching it, it may be positive, negative, I may be saying it wrong, or I may be, your outside is positive ions and when you're inside it's negative. Either way it goes. So I realized, what happens if you prolong this? So what happens if you actually are outside longer than you're inside? Because that's like that's not the life that we live, right? That's not the American life. You know what I mean? Because the American life has not been designed around that. 8 hours of work, 8 hours of sleep, and 8 hours of, partying, bullshit, or whatever the fuck people do with their 8 hours. It just depends on what type of lifestyle you live. So it's like our life has already been carved out. So I decided, let me break the matrix. I'm going to break the matrix as I always do, right? I always break the matrix. Let me break the matrix, right? Fuck this 8 hour, 8 hour, 8 hour shit, right? 8 times 3, 24. Fuck this 8 hour shit. So let me stay outside longer than I'm inside. Let me figure out, okay, well, how do you do that? Let me figure out something. Let me figure out how to be outside more than I'm inside. Let me take myself out of my comfort zone. Let me glitch the matrix and see what happens. Why? Because every time I am ready to transcend, I have to challenge myself to do what no one else is willing to do, right? So every time I speak, it's always because I did something that no one else is willing to do. Why? Because I can't contact anybody or see anybody doing what I'm doing. I look and I observe. Again, when you're outside longer than you're inside, you literally see everything and everybody, how they live, what they're doing, what they're not doing. Because you can assume if people are inside, they're pretty much at rest. They're either chilling on the couch, bullshitting, doing whatever they're doing, right? They're not really doing anything too spectacular. So whenever people do come outside, because you gotta prepare yourself, people have to, you gotta put your clothes on, you gotta cleanse yourself, you gotta present yourself to the world when you come outside. So there's a lot more, you can be inside in your drawers and your underwear. You can just be doing whatever. It's not really too much going on when you're inside. So when you're outside, you're on the world stage. So when you're on the world stage longer than you're inside, which is your personal stage, when you're constantly in other people's face, when you're constantly on display, you begin to change. You begin to charge yourself with energies that you're not charging yourself with when you're inside, because your mind shifts. When pretty much every time you step outside, there's eyes on you at all times, right? Especially when you look like me. Right? Every time I go into a store, every time I go anywhere, I immediately sense someone's watching me. Whether they think I'm going to steal, whether they think I'm going to whoop their ass, whether I make people uncomfortable. I see it because I can observe and I already know. I can go into any store right now, let me see what he's doing, right? I get that every single time. Why? Because the energy is different, right? So whenever you step outside and you stay outside, you're pretty much on display. Somebody's eyes are locked on you for whatever reason, whether they think you're doing wrong or they're just looking at you just to see what's going on. Someone's eyes is always on you. So you're constantly absorbing energy at all times when you're outside, longer than you're inside. So let me get to the revelations. Again, I don't want to take up too much time here. Let me get to the revelations. So I decided, okay, what happens if I'm outside longer than I'm inside? We also know that we just passed the full moon. So most people don't know this, but I'll inform you. For the month of October, there will be 2 full moons. We already passed the full moon. It was on the 1st, and the second full moon will be on the 31st, Halloween. This will not happen again for another 20 years, where it's 2 full moons in the same month. So the next time this will happen is in 2039, which is 20 years. So this month is a special month. It won't happen again for 20 years. Right? It's just things like that that I begin to pay attention to, right? Like, oh, this is a special month and this will not happen again. Like, so the next time this happens, I'll be in my 40s or some shit, right? Or actually 50s maybe, you know? So I'm like, okay, let me take advantage of this energy. So that's what I've been doing. I'm like, okay, let me take advantage. Full moon in Libra and Taurus. It all depends on what system you're looking at, right? That's the Western perspective, but you already know there's many perspectives. So let me get to the revelation. I've been working with the spirit of Allah. You know, I've worked with the spirit of Allah before. I've been live. You know, if for those who've been watching me, whenever I do them long ass live streams, which I challenge anybody else to do. I challenge anybody else to do it. I don't see too many people doing it. 8-hour live streams, 5-hour live streams, 6-hour live streams, because most people don't even have enough words, right? Most people don't even have enough words to even speak for that long, for hours upon hours upon hours, a full work day of running your mouth, but actually having substance behind your words. It's really not possible. Why? Because most people ain't lived enough life. And I don't mean you just living and you're just doing shit. I'm talking about really getting the jewels out of the earth, out of the dirt, putting that work in, putting these rituals in, spilling blood, right? This is what I'm doing. I'm like, okay. I'm here to work with the jinn. Like, let's get into the real shit right now. I'm here to summon the jinn. I'm here to work with Allah. I'm here to work with archdevils. Fuck all this angel shit. I don't trust motherfuckers who deal with angels. I'm gonna tell you right now. Why? Because it's easy. I don't give a fuck about no angels. I'm not talking about the archangels. I'm not talking about the archangel. I'm talking about anybody, all this soft ass shit that we hear and we see all the time. I don't want no parts and no pieces of no soft shit. Let me summon these motherfucking demons. Let me summon these motherfucking archdevils, these jinn, and see what the fuck that get it. The fuck. Again, let me not go too deep into that, right? Let me take my time. Let me pace myself so that the point is not missed. Because ain't nobody else gonna do it, right? And I know ain't nobody else gonna do it because people have fear in their heart. Because they don't know that it is them. They don't know that they're waking up parts of themselves, right? They know that they're still on that spooky shit. But if you're still on that spooky shit, you're not gonna get no real game. That's what I've learned. You ain't getting no real game. Ain't nobody getting no real game if you ain't working with the dark side. If you ain't left-handed with it. If you ain't left-handed, then it is what it is. There's no way that you're doing the same shit that everyone else is doing, but you're expecting to get new results or different results. There's people with no knowledge working with angels, working with these soft-ass spirits, and there ain't no way that you're doing the same thing, but you're expecting something different. That's the definition of insanity. Doing the same thing over and over again, but expecting different results. There's no way it's going to happen, right? Yeah, definitely check out the website, ashrenew.com. I got a whole nother set of, I don't want to say readings, revelations, right? My revelations are more advanced. If you look at everything I have to offer on my website, I completely revamped it. So that's what I've been doing for like the last week, for this 40th week, because we're still in the 40th week. I believe this is the last day, because this is Saturday. Yeah, so this is Saturday. So tomorrow, Sunday, will be the 41st week of the year. So for this whole 40th week, I've been revamping and, you know, just going back to the foundation. No problem. So let's get to it. So I came out here. I'm like, let me see what the jinn got to say, right? And most people don't even know what the jinn is. Why? Because most people don't read the Quran. Because again, we are in an American society. Most people are familiar with the Christians, I said the Christians. Most people are familiar with the Bible, right? Most people are familiar with the Bible. They can quote the Bible all day, every day, but they can't really quote the Quran, right? That's too deep for most people. Most people don't even know that's something that's unknown, right? So I'm like, okay, well let me actually explore. Let me see what's going on. So yesterday or last night, whatever, I pulled one of the runes because I also work with the runes. See, that's that Germic, the dark side of the Germic magic. So I got a whole set of runes. So I pulled the rune, and the rune I pulled was called Isa, the rune Isa, which represents the ice for those who are into that science, which basically says that I'm going through a personal winter in my life. So my life right now, I'm going through a personal winter. So it's like winter time. It's an internal winter time for me. So whenever it's winter time, what happens in winter time? Okay, well, that's when Christmas happens, right? That's the resurrection of the Christ. But that's also Capricorn season, which is the devil's territory, right? And that's why I'm always talking about this dark shit. Okay, so what happened? So as I am working with Isa, eventually a law comes through the back of my head. So a law says, summon me. I'm like, all right, I'll summon you. Let's see what you got to say. So I'm going through the process, going through the process, going through the process. And this, what was revealed to me, shit that I never even considered. I'm like, fuck. Let's start with NWA, because of course I'm on the West Coast, right? So let's start with NWA. When NWA came out, you know that they was on fuck the police time, right? Fuck the police, right? But let's look deeper into this, because why does that even matter? Because I'll let you know right now. Ice Cube was the pen or the mouthpiece for NWA. He was writing the lyrics, right? Ice Cube was writing the lyrics for NWA because Ice Cube was a what? Ice Cube, I believe he still is a Muslim. Ice Cube is a Muslim, right? I believe his name is O'Shea, his actual name. He is a Muslim. That means he's familiar with the Quran. So NWA had the impact it had because NWA had no radio play. For those who remember those times, NWA had no radio play, but it was the hottest record on the streets with no radio play. Selling all those records, no radio play, right? However, we eventually saw that Ice Cube, he left the group, right? Then NWA started to beef with Ice Cube, right? So once Ice Cube left the group, they started to beef with him. Remember, Ice Cube is a Muslim. Remember, we also know that Eazy-E was invited into the White House, right? So Eazy-E had went to the White House because he had been invited to the White House. And lo and behold, after that, and during that time, their music started to degrade and degrade and degrade, and it just became a bunch of bitches and hoes, right? You know, the music just became, you know, just regular ass hip hop music. I'm not gonna call it hip hop, rap music. NWA started off as hip hop, then it became rap once Ice Cube departed. Why? Because they didn't have that magical pen. Ice Cube had the magical pen. Why? Because he was implementing the will of Allah. Allah has the power to move the streets. I'll get deeper into that in just a second. It was a magical pen of Allah, the will of Allah, that made the streets completely shift until he left. Then they started beefing with him. What does this mean? This is the holy war. It is a holy war. The reason why he had to leave, he was forced to leave because it was a plot from the higher ups. I'm just going to speak in code, right? It was a plot from the higher ups to get him away from the group because he was connected with the will of Allah, and they could not let that happen. So once they took the will of Allah from NWA, their music began to disintegrate. Why? Because you no longer had that magical pen. But it is the will of Allah that moves the demons or the jinn in the streets, because the streets are filled with jinn and demons. So once you got that magical pen, because you have the will of Allah within you, that's how NWA was able to move the streets and make the impact they made. It was because they were in tune with the will of Allah, period. It is a holy war. Let's bring it up to modern times. Let's bring it up to modern times. Earlier this year, we know we went through it back in February. We know we had the death of the rapper Pop Smoke, right? I don't know if people were familiar, but Pop Smoke was a Muslim. I don't know how many people knew that, but if you're familiar with his music, maybe you know, maybe you don't, right? Also, we had rappers like, it was a Philadelphia rapper. What was his name? It'll come to me in a second. The point I'm trying to make is, when it comes to these Muslim rappers, so it was an Atlanta rapper, I believe, named Rollo, right? Yeah, AR Ab, exactly. AR Ab. Then it was an Atlanta rapper also called Rollo, right? I believe they're still locked up currently. So you have a lot of these Muslim rappers either getting killed or locked up, completely taken off the map as if they didn't exist at all, right? But what is the common denominator? The common denominator is Allah. They had the will of Allah inside of them, and the will of Allah can move the streets. Jesus ain't moving these streets. It's not, right? Let's just be real, right? Let's just be real. Jesus does not have the ability to move the streets. It's just not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. Also, this is why rappers like Tekashi have been able to succeed, right? Because if Pop Smoke had not died, Tekashi would not be able to be in the position he was in. Also, if Bobby Shmurda didn't get locked up, or if Bobby Shmurda was released in 2020, because he was supposed to be released in 2020, but they denied his bail. So he has to stay in jail to 2021. So in the midst of this time, it's like Tekashi has no resistance. But this is what most people don't know. That's obvious, right? But most people don't know Tekashi is not a government informant. There was an actual man named Tekashi, right? Before all this, let's go back in time. Go back in time. There was a government agent who was sent to America to recruit the Muslims at the time who were in the Nation of Islam. This is, people don't know the history because they're not doing their history, right? So they just think of Tekashi, they just see the fabrications and the bullshit, right? But no, this way deeper than people will ever realize. And if this video gets deleted, I'm not doing it again. And that's why I want to do it live, right? So whoever hear it you just need to hear it. Again, so I don't know what the result will be. But back in the day, there was a government agent who was implemented. He was put in the hood to try to break up the Nation of Islam. And his name was Tekashi. Most people don't know. So this still goes back to Islam, the holy war. But this is not common knowledge. And the only reason I know, because the Spirit communicates with me directly. This is the only reason I know. So I didn't come across this because I was looking for it, because why would I be looking for it? How would I be looking for it? The Spirit led me to this. This is how I even know. This is the holy war. We have been in the middle of the holy war, and we will continue to be in the midst of the holy war. Why? Because ever since we have been in the 21st century started in the year 2001. Not the year 2000, the year 2001. And we know what happened in 2001, 9/11. And who was supposed to be responsible for that? The Muslims, right? So ever since we've been in the 21st century, we have been in the Holy War. We are still in the Middle East to this day. 20 years later. 20 years later, we're still in the Middle East. We're still going back and forth with this Holy War, right? Now, of course, the average Muslim would not agree with what was done. They were like, okay, we don't have nothing to do with that, right? So I'm not talking about the average Muslims, right? Because the average Muslim is not going to blow themselves up and, promise the virgins. We know the story. If you die implementing the will of Allah, you pretty much automatically go to heaven. According to Islam, if you die as a warrior, essentially, you automatically go to heaven and you're promised all these virgins. This is the philosophy, right? So of course, they're like, oh, okay, cool. But again, this is not, I'm not talking about the average person, okay? This holy war has been going on, because again, that's why I wanted to take it all the way to NWA, because that was back in the 80s, I believe, like 1986, 1987, right? So that was back in those times, right? So that was the 20th century. So it's still going on in the 21st century. This Christianity versus Islam, right? And we already know that if we're dealing strictly with America and the Nation of Islam, which was started back in the 30s, 1930, by Farad Muhammad and given to Elijah Muhammad, we already know, that, they were trying to infiltrate that from the beginning, right? But most people don't know that history either. Most people don't know that history. Of course I do, because I'm from the land, right? The Nation of Islam was started in Detroit. I'm from the land, right? So who the fuck else is gonna tell you this, right? When it comes to the Nation of Islam, the original Nation of Islam, because there's two different forms of the Nation of Islam. There's two different forms. Because the original Nation of Islam, they were into blood sacrifice. They don't talk about this, but they were. Like there's proof and there's evidence. For those who want to do their research, you feel free to do their research. But there were members of the Nation of Islam that were practicing blood sacrifice. They were creating altars in their home and stabbing motherfuckers through the chest because they felt that it would take them closer to Allah. So the original Nation of Islam was in the blood sacrifice, but then there was a different section, and that's what Elijah Muhammad took over, where they did not agree with that. They were like, oh, we ain't with that shit, right? So the Nation of Islam that most people are familiar with the Elijah Muhammad, the Malcolm X, the Muhammad Ali, so on and so forth, that was a different form of the Nation of Islam. That was not the original, okay? So just to make a distinction, there is a distinction between the two. And again, all this can be proven, it's already been proven, it's already documented. Okay? So the original Nation of Islam was into blood sacrifice. What does that mean, though? You can actually research it. For those who want to do the research, this is why the Nation of Islam, they were called a voodoo cult back in the day. That's the name that they were given. Like it was in newspapers and all that. So there's newspaper articles to show and prove this. So I'm not saying anything that has not already been shown and proven. So they were deemed a voodoo cult in their original inception. Why? Because people were ritualistically being killed. So no, they were not picking up guns and just shooting people in the head or just shooting people in the chest. No, they were creating altars, and people were willingly laying on those altars and getting killed. So no, they were not snatching people up off of the streets and making people do something that, no. Even the sacrifice, the person that was being sacrificed, they were fully aware of what they were doing and they were okay with what they were doing because they felt they were going straight to heaven to be closer with Allah, so they didn't have a problem with it. But why was it called a voodoo cult? What does voodoo have to do with that, right? Well, apparently they made that connection because obviously voodoo was into blood sacrifice as well. Well, if we look at the history of voodoo, we know that voodoo was outcasted because we know voodoo was started in the South. Well, not started, obviously it comes from Haiti, the voodoo, but once the free Haitians they navigated to the Americas or the North America and they started doing their own thing. But voodoo was outlawed, right, by the church, for those who know the history, right? So the church outlawed voodoo, so they had to practice voodoo in the dark, right? So the only thing they can hear from voodoo is the drums because they had to leave the city because they were not allowed to practice their religion openly. So they had to do it in secret. So the only thing that the church could hear was the drums that were being played over the hills in secret. So this is where the fear of voodoo comes from because all you can hear is the drums. You don't know what's going on. And obviously voodoo was open. Voodoo wasn't racist, you know, so you had people of all colors, creeds, lifestyles coming into voodoo, adding on to the pantheon, right? So even to this day, if you go to New Orleans, you got people of all shades and all types, you know, practicing voodoo because everyone was accepted. Now, taking it a step further. These are the things that we don't know because we were never taught. These are the things that we don't consider, but all of this is relevant in this day and time. All of this is relevant in this day and time because we still see it happening. Again, that's why I wanted to bring it up to a modern day example of Pop Smoke, right? And the reason I brought up the Pop Smoke because Pop Smoke was, you know, if we go into the gang lifestyle, he was a Crip, but he was a Crip from New York. But he was killed on the West Coast, and they say he was killed by gang members on the West. So it was like, okay, well, what was that all about, right? They say it was a robbery gone wrong, right? They wanted to take his jewelry, but they end up, you know, I guess he shot back, yada, yada, yada. I don't know the details. I don't want to get into the details. You know, I just want to make this point of most gang members are not Islamic, right? That's not something that they're into. They're more so into the Christian belief system. Not to say that they're religious at all. It's just that, again, I'm trying to speak in code, but it's just not working. Let me just say it how it was revealed to me, because again, I know like once you say the wrong word, then shit starts glitching and the video goes down and all this shit, right? But let's just do it anyway. You have a lot of gang members who work for the government or on behalf of the government. They are killers for the government. Let's go back to Freeway Ricky Ross, the famous drug dealer, right? You know, he was a big drug dealer in his time. But eventually he came to the understanding that, like, oh, I'm actually working for the government. Even he came to the conclusion, like, yo, I'm thinking I'm this big drug dealer. I'm really working on behalf of the government. When it comes to certain gang members, they are supported by the government. So the government uses gang members to do their dirty work. So that's why when we see people like us getting killed, it's not really by the cops or, you know, by other races or other creeds. We're getting killed by people who look just like us, but they're not for us and they're not with us. They work on behalf of the government. Why? Because this is what they do. What they do is, let's just say you go to jail for whatever it is that you did, then they approach you, right? They're like, all right, we see what you're doing. All we have to do is put a technicality in your case and you can get off free. But now you belong to us. So they will approach you, but pretty much put your case to rest so that you can go free. And it'll basically be like a technicality. So it's not like you actually have to snitch on somebody. So it's not that you have a snitch jacket. So no one's going to think like, oh, you had to snitch on this person. Well, no, it don't have to be like that. They can like, oh, you got off from a technicality, right? That, okay, the police did something wrong or there was a flaw in your investigation. So if there's a flaw in your investigation, you get off, right? So then you're back on these streets, right? So on paper, it looks like you did nothing wrong. You just got off. You got lucky. You got off. You got the right lawyer. You paid the right amount of money, yada, yada, yada. You're back on the streets. When in reality, now you become a hitman for the government. So they're going to use you when they want to take someone out. So this is why our greats are killed by people that look just like us. Even if we go to Tupac, right? Machiavelli rather, because he doesn't accept Tupac. For those who are into spiritual work, you know that he changed his name to Machiavelli before he died, right? So if you're activating Tupac, Tupac never came out of prison. Machiavelli came out of prison. Tupac died in prison. He was resurrected as Machiavelli. So if you want to work with Tupac, you have to work with Machiavelli, right? Just little things like that make the biggest difference. Why? Because the majority of the world know him as Tupac, but very few people know him as Machiavelli, so that energy is more potent. And that's what I mean. Most people are working with spirits that everybody is pulling on. You can say there's millions of people that pull on the energy of Jesus. So Jesus is weak. Because you got millions and millions of people pulling on that energy. But very few people pull on the darker forms of energy. That's why they're so powerful, because most people are afraid to work with them. So if you actually do work with them, you know you can actually build a relationship with them because there's not too many people fucking with them. But that's why if you're working with angels and archangels and you're working with shit that anybody has access to, is they're not really strong or potent because you got so many people who's not into any of this, who don't know any of this. They're pulling on energies, and how much can you really get from that, right? If you're working with the same energies that people who don't know nothing are working on, right? Or working with, rather. So let's take this a step further. For those who know, Tupac, rather Machiavelli, took his name after the Machiavelli who wrote the book The Prince, who faked his death. That's why there was this whole speculation about Tupac faking his death, yada, 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 because he took on the name Machiavelli, yada, yada, yada. If you look at his final photo, there's no keys in the ignition, right? If you look at the last photo, they say the photo that was taken minutes before his death, supposedly, right? But if you look at there's no fucking keys in the car. So how the fuck is it? How was this picture taken before his death if there's no keys in the ignition? There's no keys in the ignition. Look at the photo right now. Look at Tupac last photo. Look at the fucking ignition. There's no keys. How the fuck is he on the strip with no keys? Anyway, right? Anyway, you can't even find videos about this on YouTube no more, right? Because this is research I did 10 years ago, and it's like I try to like all of the shit I was watching to unlock these codes. Or you can't even find it no more. It's not even on YouTube. You can't find it. I tried to look up some shit that I was researching years ago, a decade ago. You can't even find it. It's all gone. You know what I mean? It's like clones. Like it was like Eminem is a clone and all that. It's like it was a lot of shit, a lot of conspiracy shit that's completely gone. It's nowhere. But I got it locked in. It's only up here now. There's just so much information that I was researching 10 years ago that you cannot find. It's gone, completely gone. It's like it never existed. But I remember it because my memory is sharp. And I put it all together. Let's take it a step further. So because we understand that we are going through a holy war, and there's casualty after casualty after casualty after casualty after casualty after casualty after casualty, but it's just all being swept under the rug. It's street shit. Well, this is just what niggas do, right? Niggas kill each other, just some street shit, but it's not that simple. It's really not that simple. These are ploys. These are plots and plans from higher ups to take out the ones who are in initiation with the will of Allah. Now, let me clarify. I'm not talking about a religious being or a religious figure. I'm not talking about the religious Allah that Muslims worship, overseas, in Mecca. I'm not talking about that Allah. That's not the Allah I'm speaking about. So I want to make myself very clear. I'm not talking about Allah in a religious sense. I'm talking about the Allah. Allah in the flesh, the Allah in person. Because if we listen to the words of Elijah Muhammad said, Allah came to him in the person of W.D. Farad. So if we're looking at the Nation of Islam, the Nation of Islam was never referring to Allah as some spiritual, invisible spook. We also know that if we study 120, the supreme wisdom, right? For the 5%ers in the Nation of Islam, you got to commit that to memory. I had to go through that. I had to commit all this to memory. That's why my memory is sharp, because 10 years ago I had to commit all this to memory because that was the initiation. You had to fast for 3 days, Before you learned anything, before you learned supreme mathematics, that's what I talked about the last video. Before you learned supreme mathematics, the supreme alphabet, 120, you had to fast for 3 days and you had to get it one lesson at a time. It took me 9 months to memorize it. It took me 9 months, almost a whole year, to memorize all that and to lock it in so that you never forget it and to keep it sharp. So if anyone wonder why I'm different than anyone else who has manifested themselves on YouTube, is because my history is different. I actually had to go through the actual initiations, right? So, you know what I mean? You ain't seeing nobody going through no type of initiation. Like, you can just be whatever you want to be. Like, I could not claim anything until I quoted all 120 of those lessons back to my enlightener. I had to quote every single fucking lesson. Period. So after 9 months, you got to quote the whole shit. Okay? And that's just to teach. That's just to teach. So I had to go through all that just to teach, just to be qualified as a teacher. So to even be qualified as a teacher, you had to go through that initiation. For some people, it may take 6 months. For other people, it take a whole year. You know, everybody's journey is different. But I had to go through that initiation just to call myself a teacher. Right? So I didn't just appear on YouTube and like, okay, like, I want to be a teacher, I want to be famous. I didn't have none of that. I had already went through the initiation, and the YouTube became an extension of that initiation. So going back to like my very first YouTube, you know, I'm flashing tarot cards and all that. And that's going back to the first video I made, part 1, where I said I had to go through the darkness. Meaning the first time I actually manifested a tarot deck, you know, that caused me to be homeless. You know what I mean? Because the situation I was in, they were religious. They saw a tarot deck, they're like, oh, he's dealing with the devil, and I had to leave. So that was my initiation into the streets. My initiation into the streets is because I brought home a tarot deck, and motherfuckers like, yo, all right, if you with the devil, then you need to take that shit somewhere else, right? So at that moment, I had to make a decision. Either put the tarot deck down and ask for forgiveness from the religious Allah, or I had to stay 10 toes down and say, okay, well, maybe I am with this shit. Because I had already been called a devil worshiper prior to that, just because of the way my hair grows. For anybody, you see, I got the chin hair, right? So I had chin hair before I had a mustache, right? So I had the chin hair, and it actually was split. Before it came together, it was split, so it looked like I had 2 spikes. So, you know, so I was already being called a devil worshiper just based off the way my hair grew. So I was already had that label on me. So of course, when I bring that tarot deck in, you know, it was a wrap. So I'm like, is this really me, or do I need to double back? So I decided to stay in the streets and learn. Because I'm like, if this is really me, then this is another initiation. I have to go through it. So all this is before YouTube, right? This is like 2010, or not 2010, like 2013 or something like that. All this is before you, because I didn't start making videos like 2014. So this is a whole year before I even showed my face, you know, on the internet. In terms of speaking, you know, and because I had to learn and go through all these initiations. So fast forward up to today and right now. The reason why I'm able to reveal these things that you won't hear anywhere else is because by me going through these actual initiations and going through these hardships and not bitching up, you know what I mean? Who the fuck wants to be homeless, right? Nobody thinks like, oh, my spiritual path is going to lead me to homelessness. No one's thinking this. But if that is the reality that you're faced with, you have a decision to make. You either got to roll over and do what everyone else tells you to do so that you can supply or be comfort, or to gain comfort, or to gain challenge. So I could have just rolled over, threw the tarot deck in the garbage, and just continue to be comfortable, you know, so that I can have a roof over my head, right? I could have maintained that roof if I threw the tarot deck in the garbage, right? Would have been comfortable, just going to my 9 to 5 like everyone else, right? But my heart wouldn't allow me to do that. I'm like, Like that's sucker shit. Like why? So I'm about to change my life because someone else doesn't like it because they don't understand it. And mind you, this is before I knew anything about the dark side. Right? This is before I knew anything about the dark side. So at the time of me actually getting the tarot deck, I wasn't into no dark shit. So this is before all that even transpired. But this is what caused it to manifest. Why? Because this is who I met in the streets, right? Because when I went into the streets, who do you find when you're in the streets? You find the devils, the demons, and the jinn, the archdevils, right? So this is who I found in the streets, okay? So let me give you more examples because this is in California, and we know like the homeless situation in California is ridiculous. It was ridiculous back then, and again, this is 7 years ago, so it's only worse now. So as I'm journeying through the streets, this is how I found out about places like Skid Row and all that. I knew nothing of Skid Row because I wasn't from California. I'm originally from Detroit, so of course I moved out there. So in the midst of me traveling the streets, I ended up traveling and I ended up at Skid Row. I'm like, oh, what is this? And I was like, oh shit, what's going on here? It was clearly some other shit that I knew nothing about. I had to do my research. I'm like, oh, I see what's going on here. But I ended up running into it because I was journeying through the streets. Because I didn't stay in one place. Because I'm like, if I'm gonna be in the streets, I don't want people to know who I am. So I'm not just gonna just be on other people's territory. Obviously, this is also gangland. So I'm in LA gangland. So I'm not just about to be just traveling over other people's streets and motherfuckers just find a reason to fuck with me, right? Not doing that. So I was continuously moving around and navigating. So that's how I began to explore. So that's why when you see me, like I'm always in the streets because I had to go through that initiation. So it wasn't nothing for me to be in the streets, whether I was in LA or New York or anywhere else, right? Because I already went through the initiations. So in the course of me going through these initiations, I'm seeing motherfuckers just laid out in the streets. Now I was exposed to shit I've never been exposed to in my life. Because obviously your parents don't want you exposed to shit like this, right? But then I had the first-hand experience. You know what I mean? Again, I was like, what kept me motivated was like, you can literally be walking down the streets and you just see bodies in the streets, right? But it kept me motivated. It didn't dampen my soul. It kept me motivated. I'm like, okay, I got to stay focused or I'm going to be just like everyone else. Where I'm just so tired and exhausted, I'm just gonna fall out on the sidewalk and you gotta walk around motherfuckers. And I'm like, oh no, that can't be me. So I stayed focused because at the time, I had already been through these initiations, right? So I was able to stay focused. So I spent most of my time in the library, right? So I spent my time in the library and I began to read. So all the time I was in the library reading, just expanding my mind, not being a victim to my circumstances. I'm like, okay, well, if I gotta be out here, I might as well make use of my time. So I spent most of my time in the library. So gaining more and more knowledge because then I realized, I'm like, oh, the Los Angeles Library has a lot of occult information. And I've already showed you guys videos years ago about the upper chambers of the library with the Sphinx and all that shit. I'm like, yo, I didn't even know none of that shit was there. Like, it's just some crazy, the whole history is crazy. And I didn't even know any of that at the time, but now looking back at it, I see why I was drawn to the library, the Central Library. Like, they have a whole, like, you go to the upper floors, they got the Great Mother, as a Sphinx, and they got the whole history of the earth. It's like, it's the crazy shit that I didn't know anything about. But I can feel the energy. So essentially, I was exposed to literally the most harshest environments you can imagine. So in that sense, this is eventually what led me to Devil's Gate. And of course, for those who've been watching my content for a while, you know that I have my experiences with Devil's Gate, right? With Aleister Crowley, Jack Parkinson's, the whole history of Hollywood. I've already revealed all that. Thelema, the Church of Scientology, L. Ron Hubbard. Like, I already revealed all that history, right? And I learned all that history by navigating the streets. I'm like, oh, how did this happen, right? Like, Hollywood used to be Hollywood Land. I'm like, oh, so it used to be Hollywood Land, then they shortened it to Hollywood. because that changes the vibration. Because Hollywood land breaks down to the number 7. For those who are into numerology, Hollywood land breaks down to 7, Hollywood breaks down to 3. We know 3 takes you to Jupiter. Jupiter is like a lighthearted energy. So if you go to Hollywood, or anyone who's been to Hollywood, it's like a lighthearted energy because that's Hollywood. But Hollywood land takes you to the 7, and that's the dark side. That's the dark side of the moon. The number 7 is the dark side of the moon. So that's why Hollywood has a scary energy. That's the original energy of Hollywood. Is very demonic, is very scary. The original manifestation of it, which most people have no idea about. They don't know nothing about that energy. Most people don't even know about Hollywood at all, right? They don't know the thelemic connection, right? They don't know about Aleister Crowley. They don't know about Jack Parkinson's library. They don't know any of that, right? That's why I had to do my own research. That's why you saw me on the lands. I'm like, oh, if I'm here, let me actually do the history of, if I'm in LA, let me actually do the history of LA so I can understand the city I'm in. And that's why I've always been telling people, you need to do the history of the city you're in so you can get those revelations from the past. That's where all that comes from. That's why I've always encouraged, you need to find out, well, what is the spirit of your city? That's why I've always been saying that, right? That comes from me actually doing the work in LA, and I did the work also in New York. When I went to New York, so I started in LA and I went to Devil's Gate. I went into the darkness, right? 50 feet into the earth, putting in work, doing rituals, right? When I went to New York, that's when I met the alien called Tan. So I went to New York, then I met an alien called Tan. I'm like, oh shit, this is why New York is the way it is, where the buildings are so high it covers up the sun. I'm like, oh, this is what, I'm like, oh, okay, so. But I already did the prior research, so I had to go into the inner earth before I went into the spaceship that they call Tan. There's a book called The Coming of Tan. For those who don't know the history, there's a book called The Coming of Tan. All right, so I got the references, right? So I'm not making any of this shit up. So I'm like, oh, Manhattan, the tan comes from a fucking alien. Anyway, alien from Saturn, right? So New York connects to the frequency of Saturn. Tan is an alien from the inner realities of the planet Saturn, all right? I'm not going too deep into that. I'm just giving you all the references so you can do your own research if you choose. So of course, me going through all these experiences, I'm learning all these things, and none of this is coming from humans. Jesus is the devil? Oh man, I don't know what would make you think that. But this actually reminds me of the revelation. So let me get back on track. Like, I'm trying to give y'all a whole history of this. Let me get back on track, right? Let me get back on track. Because I did want to speak on the devil. I did want to speak on that. Because I asked the law. See, this is what happens to me, right? Because the purpose of being spiritual, quote unquote, is to establish communication with your holy guardian angel, which comes from Thelema. For those who are into Thelema, which I know is very, 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 very few people. For those who are into Thelema, you know the whole purpose of you going into Thelema is to establish communication with your holy guardian angel. All the new agers call that the higher self, right? I call it the holy guardian angel. The whole purpose is to establish connection with your holy guardian angel. So for Aleister Crowley, his holy guardian angel was Aiwass. For those who know the history, Aiwass, right? Who was Aiwass? Well, Aiwass comes from Egypt. Aleister Crowley traveled to Egypt in 1904 with his wife at the time, right? Aleister Crowley traveled to Egypt, and his wife went to the Cairo Museum, and she went to the statue of Horus, or Haru, and Haru communicated to his wife and said, bring him here. So his wife conveyed him the message, then he summoned Haru, or Horus, depending on which name, and that's where the Book of the Law comes from. For those who know that history, the Book of the Law came from Aiwass, channeled by Aleister Crowley in 1904. So this is 1904. The Book of the Law is a foundation for Thelema. Right? The Book of the Law is only like 14 pages. It's like a red book. It's only like 14 pages. I read it. It will change your life. But I don't recommend people to, if you're not advanced, it's like reading the Bible, the Quran. It's just like a metaphysical book. It's not going to make too much sense, right? You gotta know how to crack the codes, right? But that's the foundation again. But this is Hollywood. All right, so Aleister Crowley, the Lima, Hollywood, the search of Scientology, because Scientology was started by L. Ron Hubbard, who was a student of Aleister Crowley. Also, Jack Parkinson's was the head of the OTO in the West Coast, and even to this day, if you go to Devil's Gate, what is at Devil's Gate? Jack Parkinson's Library, JPL. Jack Parkinson's Library. Or library, that's not library, laboratory. Jack Parkinson's Laboratory is in Devil's Gate to this day. Church of Scientology is in Los Angeles to this day. They run Hollywood. Like, you go to Hollywood, you literally got Scientologists standing at the corner, you know what I mean, trying to recruit motherfuckers to this day, right now. But again, most people don't know anything about the history, so it is what it is. All right. So I learned all this traveling the streets. This is the point I'm making. I learned all this traveling the streets. I didn't learn this just keeping my head in books all day. I had to navigate the lands. You see, I had to travel this whole goddamn country to learn this shit firsthand, communicating with the spirit directly. There was no man or no woman that told me any of this. Right? This is not coming from man. Coming from Tan. So let's speak on the devil, because someone said Jesus is a devil, right? So let me speak about this. Because I asked Allah, and that's where I was getting at. What'd you say? Okay. No problem. Motherfuckers trying to kill the vibe. Anyway. Now, what I was saying was I established communication with my holy guardian angel, right? How do I know? Like, what do I mean by that? It's like now I'm at a point where like my body triggers when I need to pay attention. Like my body, I will have a bodily reaction. You know, if it's like if I think a thought and the thought is right and exact, I will have a bodily reaction. And that's how I know it's right and exact, because I will have an actual physical reaction if it's right and exact. This is how I communicate with spirits. So when I'm working with spirits, I know if they're like, yeah, you're moving in the right direction, because it will be a bodily reaction that comes from my unconscious mind. So it's not something I'm doing. It's literally I can't even stop it. You know what I mean? My body would tighten up or something like that, and it's like it's not me doing it. So I had to go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into that. Okay. So I was communicating with Allah last night, and I was asking, because the devil in Islam is called the shaitan, right? The shaitan, right? So they don't say Satan. So in Arabic, Satan is shaitan, right? So I was confused, right? Because I'm like, well, Allah is said to be the Lord of all worlds, right? Allah is said to be the Lord of all worlds. So I said, well, if Allah is the Lord of all worlds, that means Allah is the Lord of hell or Hades as well. But of course, we know the shaitan is the ruler of hell, or so we think. So I asked Allah, I'm like, what the fuck is this about? How does that make sense? How is Allah the Lord of all worlds, but the shaitan is the Lord of the dark? Then it was revealed to me that shaitan is Allah, and just like turned inside out. So in a sense, it's just like, this is how we understand the planet Earth. We understand the planet Earth as, let me frame this in a way that can be very understood. Let me frame this in this way. Divine light does not manifest as divine light on the physical plane, right? Divine light, I'll say it one more time, divine light does not manifest as divine light on the physical plane. Meaning nobody's gonna fucking see the sky part and see Allah or God and in the fullest form. That's not gonna ever happen, because we're on earth. For those who are into the Kabbalistic teachings, the tree of life, We know you can say the divine light is Kether, but we're all the way down on Malkuth. So that divine light, once that divine light reaches the earth or the physical plane, is a shadow, hence a demon or a devil. So Allah in the highest worlds manifests as the devil in the lower worlds, or the shadows or the darkness. So all these demons and these devils and these jinns, these are specks of divine light, but because we are so far from that divine light, from the divine source, they appear as devils and shadows and ghouls and nightmares and all this shit, right? That's just how they appear on the physical plane, but that's not necessarily what they are. So people who have all this fear of the dark side, the left-handed path, the Satan, the devil, the Lucifer and all that, these are divine lights. As we know, Lucifer comes from heaven, right? Lucifer descended into the hellish realms. But Lucifer originates in heaven. Like Lucifer was an angel and he fell from the angelic realms down to Malkuth. He fell from Kether to Malkuth. And then he became the ruler of the earth, or the lord of the world, lord of this world, right? So Lucifer, or devil, or the Satan, is also called the lord of this world. So then I asked, so does that mean that the shaitan has a greater pull on the earth? Hold on 1 second. Someone had sent me a text message. I'll get to that in just a second. So I asked, does the shaitan have a greater pull in this world than the law does? Then the answer was yes, because the shaitan is the ruler of this world, right? You can say if Allah stays in heaven, Allah doesn't descend into the world, but the shaitan does. So what does that mean? I'm like, well, okay, well, I was like, what does that mean? I'm like, oh, and it sparked. I'm like, okay, this is what the left-handed path is about. This is where it gets deep. This is where it gets deep. Why? Because you have two different types of Muslims, right? Or those who are into the religion of Islam. You have two different types of Islam. You can say you got the righteous Muslims, then you got the unrighteous the righteous form of Islam, then you got the unrighteous form of Islam. You can say the unrighteous form of Islam is what Osama bin Laden was into, right? Like, so we talk about, and that may be a trigger word, whatever. Osama bin Laden, because they say he was the one that masterminded the attack of the Twin Towers, right? But Osama bin Laden obviously was a Muslim, right? But he wasn't necessarily the Muslim that you would actually run into on an everyday basis, right? You're probably not going to ever meet a Muslim that will subscribe to what he was into. But these are a different form of Muslims, right? That type of Muslim does exist. And in that type of Muslim's mind, they feel like they are in a war, a holy war, and it's called the jihad, right? The jihad. That's what they feel that they are fighting against. They are fighting against, or they are in a holy war, and they are going through a jihad. That's why they're willing to sacrifice themselves, kill themselves, because they feel that they are doing something righteous, even though the average Muslim does not agree with that shit. Like, okay, I can't agree with that, right? So, if the shaitan, you can say, has a pull over those Muslims, and again, that goes back to, let's just say the rappers. Let's take it back to America with the American rappers, like the Ice Cubes and the Pop Smokes, the AR Abs, the Rollos, right? So you have American Muslims who pretty much are in the streets, right? The average Muslim, is not going to subscribe to that, the smoking weed, the gun toting, the selling of drugs and all that. The average Muslim's not, that's forbidden, that's prohibited. You ain't supposed to be engaging in none of that, right? But you do have a certain section of Muslims that participate in all that shit, all of that unrighteousness, right? And this is the left-handed path of the Islamic tradition. You got the right-handed, you got the left, and the same thing with Christians, right? but to a lesser degree. So taking this a step further, I'm saying, okay, if that's the case, because if Allah created the shaitan in the first place, and Allah is the Lord of all worlds, that means Allah is the shaitan of this world. That means Allah is the dark, the destructive, and the shadowy parts of this world as well. Meaning you cannot judge. This is what it means to not judge. See, we get it confused when we hear that language. Like when most people hear like don't judge, they take it as, don't judge people. But what it's really saying is don't judge, meaning your actions have to be either right or left. In other words, if you gotta do some left-handed path activity in the will of Allah, then that is permissible. For example, most Muslims are prohibited from eating pork. But if you are starving, you can eat it, right? That's not a violation. So if you are a Muslim, you're not supposed to eat pork. But if you are starving and you have nothing else to eat, you can eat it, right? So there's always a fine line between what you can and can't do. There's always a reason why you can actually do something, even if it's prohibited. Like Muslims are not supposed to get drunk. Muslims are not supposed to do any of these things, right? But there's always a fine line between what can be done and what can't be done, right? This takes us to the jinn. For those who are familiar with the Quran, Allah created the jinn who are made of fire before he created man. So before Allah created humans, he created the jinn. I'm just using the he, just for context. Allah created the jinn. Most people don't know about the jinn because the jinn are not spoken about in the Bible. The jinn are spoken about in the Quran. So if you have not read the Quran, you probably are not familiar with the jinn and how they came to be and how they had their own separate reality outside of our reality. So we don't cross paths. So the jinn and the humans, they don't cross paths. They have their own separate realities. For those who are into the Kabbalistic teachings, this actually makes a lot more sense. The jinn are composed of fire. So the fire world is called Atzaluf. So the jinn reside in the world of Atzaluf, and we are in the world of Asia. Asia is the earth world. So the jinn will be in the realm of Atzaluf, and the humans will be in the world of Asia. Right? So we're all the way at the bottom, and they're all the way up top. Okay? The jinn in these times are called the Goetia. So most people, again, if you're into the darkness, you should be familiar with the Goetia spirits, the 72 Goetia, right? These are the jinn. These are also the spirits that King Solomon used to build his temple, right? So King Solomon called upon the jinn to build his temple. So that means the jinn are the builders. Okay. Let's take this a step further. Because there's so many layers. There's so many layers to this. That's why I have to take my time. I have to take my time to explain. There's just so many layers to this. Okay. Now, let's take this a step further. When it comes to the jinn, because the jinn are the builders, the jinn are, you can say, led by the shaitan. The shaitan has rulership over the jinn. If we look at this world, now we have to take it to 120. Now we have to take it to the supreme wisdom, right? If you study the supreme wisdom, the words of W.D. Farad Muhammad and Elijah Muhammad, they speak about how the devil was given 6,000 years to rule this world, or the earth, right? So let me say that again. In 120, it speaks about how the devil was made to rule this world for 6,000 years. So if we look in this world and why this world seems so demonic and devilish and wicked, and all of the unrighteous people have access to the money, what I mean, and like the righteous people, like we only get the crumbs and all that, is because it was prescribed. It was prescribed to be this way. This is also another thing. Allah also revealed to me this is why we will never get reparations, because you have people fighting for reparations and all that. So I asked him, are we owed reparations? And the answer was no, because it is the will of Allah for the devil to rule this world for a prescribed amount of time, 6,000 years to be exact. This comes from the story of Yaqub. Again, some people may be familiar, some people may not be, right? Yaqub is the father of the devil. He taught the devil devilishment, right? And he had a certain time to rule this world. So we are in the times where the devil has control. That's why the devil has all the resources, can do all that. I believe it's only 1% of black people that actually are the heads of like big companies, Fortune 500 companies and big companies, right? I'm late, but my mind's still on Devil's Gate. I was scared and went all the way to the bottom and legit just felt so comfortable. It was safe. We must face our fears. Absolutely. Absolutely. See, all right. I respect you because you were able to go into there. You know what I mean? I know you were afraid, but you made it. And you see how it changed you. We did the ritual. So I respect you for that, for going into the Devil's Gate, because most people were not. I remember being there alone. And again, I'm not going to get off point. I just want to make this one point. These are not the places where people go by themselves because they're too afraid, because the energy shifts. Like when you're in a demonic, possessed, haunted place, most people ain't going into haunted houses by themselves trying to figure out what's going on. They're not strong enough because your spirit is activated and enhanced. All right? But let's get back to the Yaqub and the devil rule for 6,000 years. Well, that's why we cannot get reparations, because this is the will of Allah, okay? Taking it a step further. So then I asked, so that means we have to do deals with the devil then. So if the devil has access to all the resources, if you want resources, that means you have to formulate deals with the devil. Because if the devil has the resources, how do you get access to the resources without dealing with the devil? Then the answer is yes. So like, so this is why people create pacts with the devil or sign the contract with the devil. Even though they know the contracts are fucked up, they still sign their name on a dotted line. That's why so many artists and entertainers and all that have fucked up contracts. And they don't even own their own masters, and they're still slaves to the contract, and they end up getting fucked over by these contracts, and you end up being in a worse position than you was before you even signed the contract, because you would end up owing them money. So let's just say, let me give an example. So let's just say, you're an artist, you get a record deal, but you flop, right? So let's just say they invested $1 million into you. So they gave you your advance, let's just say $250,000, then they invested $750,000 into you, into your music. So let's just say you don't recoup, right? So if you don't recoup, then now you're in debt. Now you owe them. And how the fuck are you supposed to pay them back $1 million and you flopped? So a lot of us be in contracts where they will not release you from your contract until you pay them back. And they will not allow you to release new music until you pay them back. So that's why we see a lot of artists, they just disappear from the face of the lands, right? Because they're not allowed to put out new music. They can't just go make a deal somewhere else. They're not allowed to, because they're in debt. So until they pay that money back, there's nothing they can do. So a lot of them, they can't put out music, and their whole life is just going down the drain because they signed their name on that dotted line, right? Let me just check my battery real fast. Okay. So this is an example of forming a pact with the devil, right? But sometimes it does not work in your favor if you are not familiar with the will of Allah and why everything happens the way it happens. So most of us are not familiar with anything that I'm talking about, right? So nothing of what I'm saying is common knowledge, right? Nothing of what I'm saying is common knowledge. But we have so many of us, so hungry to get out of our situation and to live a different type of lifestyle that we make these pacts without knowing how to master the shaitan, right? If you don't know how to master the shaitan, which is in the Supreme Wisdom, which is in 120 if you know it, which is in the Quran if you read it, but most people don't. Again, this is not common knowledge, so most people have no idea how to actually make these deals and make these pacts with these devils and come out on top. Very few people know that, okay? So, because the devil or the shaitan has the resources, you have to form a pact to get access to these resources, but you have to do it strategically because they're not doing it for your best interest. They're actually trying to take advantage of you. But only with the will of Allah, only with the knowledge of God or knowledge of Allah, do you know how to supersede the shaitan. Because Allah is the Lord of all worlds, right? So if Allah is the Lord of all worlds, that means even the laws of the land. So let's take this a step further. And I'm not going to take up too much more time here. I just want to lay this out in a way that we understand. So let me speak about the results and the solutions now. So now that I laid it all out, what do? What is the solution? How do you navigate successfully now that you understand the situation we're in? So for one, don't look at this world or this reality as something is happening that shouldn't be happening. Everything that is happening is supposed to be happening. It is the will of Allah. We are supposed to be at the bottom and navigate our way through the serpentine forces, right? We are here to formulate pacts with devils, with the shaitan, with the jinn, just as Solomon allowed the jinn to build his temple. We must work with the darker forces of reality, but we have to be strategic with these darker forces. This is why most people are afraid of the darker forces, because they feel like it's going to bite them in the ass, essentially, right? Most people don't work with dark energy because they feel it's going to have a negative effect on them, okay? And they are absolutely right, but they don't have the necessary knowledge to supersede it. So how do you supersede? The jinn are in the world of At-Saluf. At-Saluf contains 3 sephra. Now we're talking Kabbalistic. Kether, Chokmah, Binah. Those are the 3 sephras that are contained within the world of At-Saluf. And you can even mention Doth, the dark side, for those who understand the tree of life, right? So the secret is Doth, because Doth takes you into the clip-off, for those who know about the clip-off. Again, I may be speaking things some people know, some people don't. In order to access the clip-off, you have to go through Doth, which is in the world of At-Saluf, okay? If we look at the paths, because there's 22 paths connected to the 10 sephra, the path that leads to Doth is the path of the high priestess, or the path of the moon. The high priestess correlates to the moon, which is the 13th path. The 13th path is the path of the high priestess, symbolized as the moon. And again, that's why I talked about in the earlier video, there's 2 full moons in this month of October. This will not happen again for another 20 years. There's 2 full moons in this month. It won't happen again. So it is the moon that allows us to access Doth. Can somebody come back from being crazy? It all depends on what made them become crazy. I don't even think it's possible to become crazy. I feel if it was possible to become crazy, then I would have lost my mind a long time ago. Because I literally put myself in hell. I should have been mad a long time ago. How long have I been talking about this dark shit? How long have I been talking about this dark shit? I should have lost my mind a long time ago. Because I guarantee anybody who lost their mind, they didn't go as deep as I did. I guarantee it. They didn't go as deep as I did. So if I'm able to go deeper and not lose my mind, someone else is losing their mind, they didn't even go that deep then. But at the same time, I had access to the knowledge. You know what I mean? So most people don't know all this. So at the same time, I do have to take that into consideration. If you don't have this knowledge, then maybe you probably would go crazy. Maybe you would. So dealing with the shaitan, dealing with the jinn, dealing with Doth, which is the 13th path, which is connected to the moon, the lunar frequency, the feminine principle, the pure feminine principle. So I'm not talking about the physical feminine principle, that's Venus. We're talking about the pure feminine principle, that's the energy of the moon. The high priestess has a instrument where she can play music, but that instrument can also be a weapon where she can fire arrows. So the high priestess is dualistic. The high priestess sits as the guardian between the dark side. So if anybody can type in the high priestess card in any tarot deck, and you see she sits in front of a veil, and that veil is covering up the dark chambers of Thoth. So she sits in front of a veil. She's covering up a veil, and the veil is some dark hellish shit. So the one who stands guard between the jinn and the humans and whatever you want to call it is the high priestess, or the energy of the moon. Also, Muslims worship, I'm not going to say they worship, of course they worship Allah, but Muslims operate on a lunar calendar. Christians operate on the solar calendar, but the Muslims operate on the lunar calendar because they have to spot the moon, and that's how they know if it's Ramadan, right? So the Muslims study the moon, right? So they are in the lunar frequency. That's why Muslims pray 5 times a day, right? And before you pray, you have to bathe yourself in water. You have to perform wudu, right? So I can use actual terms. Muslims had to perform wudu before they even make prayer called salat. So before Muslims make salat, they have to perform wudu. So they're doing that 5 times per day, which you have to essentially wet your head, your hands, your feet, go through this whole process 3 times. Your hand, your face, you just go through the ritual, wet yourself before you can even pray. So they have to douse themselves in water before they even pray to their God, or Allah in this case. So they have to bathe themselves in the lunar frequencies, the pure lunar frequencies, before they can even make salat. So what are they doing when they descend in salat and they're making their rakats? When they descend and put their head on that mat, that's them descending into Thoth. Because when you put your forehead, because some Muslims, they have a mark on their forehead, like the Hindus, they have like the red mark, but some Muslims have a mark because they, from praying, they have a little mark right there, descending into Thoth. And that's where you're supposed to ask Allah for what you want. Muslims know this. Again, I come from a Muslim background, so I already know all this stuff, right? You're supposed to ask for what you want when you put your head on that ground. When you submit to Allah, that's when you ask for what you want. When you go into Thoth, that's when you ask for what you want. When you descend into the underworld, that's when you ask for what you want. When you are in full submission to Allah, that's when you ask what you want. Okay? Why? Because you are in the frequency of the high priestess, standing guard between the dark and the light. Thoth takes you into the clip-off, if you want to be technical, the clip-off, which is the backside of the tree of life, or the Kabbalah. So you got the Kabbalah, which is the light side. Then you have Thoth, which is the in-between. Then you have the clip-off. The Kabbalah, the clip-off, the tree of life, the tree of death, right? The jinn exist in the tree of death, right? So most Muslims, they exist on the tree of life, but the jinn exists in the tree of death, which is the clip-off, which is activated, or you go into the clip-off through Thoth. Thoth means gnosis. For those who want to know what Thoth means gnosis. Gnosis is like a meditative state, a lunar meditative state. So when you're in your gnosis, gnosis also means knowledge. So you have to go into a state of gnosis to collect knowledge. That's what the Hindus do when they perform their yoga and they do their meditation. The purpose of meditation is to get into a point of gnosis, or delta brain waves, if we want to be technical. Delta brain waves, also called the unconscious mind. So when to get into the unconscious mind or delta brainwaves or gnosis, you do so with lunar energy, pure lunar energy. When you become the high priestess, standing guard between the chaos and the light, meaning one hand in the light, one hand in the dark. So the only thing that's able to balance the light and the dark is that state of gnosis, delta brain waves, when you unlock the secrets of your unconscious mind, and that's where you explore what your alter ego. Your unconscious mind connects you to your alter ego. So while most people are inflating their ego, it's for you to disintegrate the ego and amplify the alter ego, which is the energy of the high priestess. So when you activate the energy of the high priestess or gnosis, when you activate the energy of gnosis, it amplifies your alter ego, which is who you really are. Who you really are is the alter ego. Our ego is just what we have created to exist in this world. That's why we do no good inflating our ego, because the ego just exists for you to operate in this world. But if we're talking about going beyond this world, if we're talking about becoming more spiritually inclined, you have to reach that state of gnosis. So you have to be who you really are. And that's why you have to descend into the dark side of the moon. So you have to activate that lunar energy to be who you really are. So that's how that works. So you have to achieve that state of gnosis. And from that state of gnosis, do you descend into the clip-off? Do you descend into the realm of the jinn, where all type of shit can go down, right? Because that is the true underworld. Become no one to be, no, you're not becoming no one, you're becoming who you are. So I didn't say you completely dissolve the ego and you're just nothingness. No, you're actually your real self, not your fake self. Our fake self is the ego. You're becoming your real self, and that's who you really are. So you're not no one, you're actually who you really are. That's your true star signature. So your alter ego is where your true star signature is. So you're becoming exactly who you are without the illusions and the glamour of the ego. So when you take the glamour of the ego away, the only thing that's left is who you really are, who you descended into this world to be. So our ego can get us caught up in all the bullshit, but the alter ego is who you really are. So on that note, I said what I had to say. So if anybody has any questions, ask them now. So we'll be here another 5 minutes and we'll check out. So hopefully some part of this message resonates. Cause I know I was all over the place. But this is how the revelations come through. Cause like I said, I don't know anything about sleep. I have not slept in I don't know how long. I don't sleep anymore, right? So it's just a continuous state of consciousness at this point. You're welcome, Trista, no doubt. What is the alter ego? It's who you really are. It's your star signature. Why no sleep? Because we don't need to sleep. We only sleep because we inflate our ego and we exhaust ourselves being who we are not. It's exhausting being who you're not. It exhausts you. You get tired when you got to deal with people, when you got to be who you're not. You're full of energy when you don't have to pretend and you don't have to fake. You're full of energy, all right? So there's no need to sleep. So I don't need to sleep. Why? Because I'm not trying to be anything other than what I am, all right? I say you don't see no one around me, it's just me. You know what I mean? So I don't have to pretend, I don't have to fake. It's just me, I stay in the state of gnosis. Do you get tired? No. All that is an illusion, but I had to learn that the hard way. So I'm not saying I've always been this way. I had to learn the hard way. I had to come out into the streets. I had to deal with the jinn. I had to come out and be in the desert, because I'm still in Vegas, so I'm in a desert, so we deal with extreme heat and extreme cold. So that's what I had to face. I'm facing extreme heat and extreme cold. But if you're not pretending, you're not being anyone else. It's like we're here to master the elements. You know what I mean? We're not victims to our circumstances or our situation. So I'm like, either I can be a victim and just crawl back home, you know, because most people had to go back home, you know, during the coronavirus, you know, all the colleges shut down, the jobs, you know, most people had to move back in with their parents. They had to go back home. I just decided that's not going to be me. I'm here to master my situation, not fall victim to circumstance. So if I'm here to master my situation, I can't do what everyone else is doing. I have to take the opposite route. I have to go down that left-hand path. So when you're going down that left-hand path, that alter ego is then manifested. So I'm out here building up my alter ego and deflating my ego. So that's how that works. Much success. I appreciate it. When did you outgrow people in your life? I was never on their level. I came into this world, you know, not with the bullshit. That's how I feel. That's what I mean. It's like we came into this world who we already was. You know what I mean? Like my diet has always been different. Like I was already lactose intolerant. I didn't like cheese. I didn't like milk. I didn't like what most people ate. So you know what I mean? It would always be awkward, you know, when people offer me food and I'm like, I don't eat this shit. You know what I mean? So I came into the world. I just have accepted myself at this point, so I don't have to deal with the bullshit. So it ain't even that you outgrow people, just you're building yourself. It's not even about other people, you're just building. I'm just building myself now, and it's not for anyone else. It's nothing but the spirit. I built myself up to have a communication with my holy guardian angel, and now that I have established the communication with the holy guardian angel, now we just put in work. You know? So now we just work, we put in work, I build up the alter ego, and now my psychic abilities is through the roof again, no sleep. So even if I lay down, I'm not going to sleep. I just go straight to the dream world and come back, and there's no breaking consciousness. So it's a whole nother thing. But it's impossible to do that shit inside the house. I was not able to do this inside. You're not going to be able to do this sitting on the couch or laying in the bed. You know what I mean? Again, if you see the environment, I'm sitting on rocks. It's probably too dark, but I'm not comfortable at all right now. I'm not sitting in a chair. There's nothing but rocks. You know what I mean? So I'm sitting on a big ass rock right now. It's highly uncomfortable. You know what I mean? So there's no comfort, but it keeps you on point. Because eventually you realize, like, oh, I can master pain, pleasure. All of these things that cause discomfort is just an illusion of the mind. We can master the elements. We are here to master the elements. We are here to master ourselves. We're not here to make ourselves more comfortable. That's an illusion. We're not here to inflate the ego. We're here to master ourselves. So if you are able to master yourself, then your discomforts are no longer discomforts. It becomes just an act of continuous gnosis. So I do my best to stay in a state of continual gnosis, and that's how you're able to receive that lunar consciousness, which is what's necessary for spiritual development. Spiritual development does not come from masculinity. Spiritual development comes from femininity. So you have to go into your feminine self. So the masculine manifests after the fact, not beforehand. And that's why the high priestess takes you to the dark side. The masculine energy don't take you to the masculine energy takes you to the light. The feminine energy takes you to the dark. So the darker you want to be, the more feminine you have to be. The feminine principle, not feminine in your attributes, feminine in the principle of gnosis, of being meditative, of stillness. All right? All right. Any thoughts on the astral? Because my dreams are crazy right now. What are those lizard things I've been seeing? Well, the astral, that's the world of, because right under, or not under, right above Asia, you have the world of Yetzirah. So the astral plane is above Asia. And again, this is all Kabbalistic tree of life. So you got the four worlds: fire, water, air, earth. So the astrals is in the air. which is the word of Yetzirah. So you have to go beyond Asia to get to Yetzirah, right? So Yetzirah is the mental plane. Then after Yetzirah, you have Bira, which is the emotional plane or the creative world, right? So we build ourselves, and again, I've been saying that from the top down, from the top down, from the top down, from the top down. Go from the top down. Start in Atzaluf and make your way to Asia. So the first thing before you do anything is achieving that state of gnosis. Have I ever tried the toad? No. I've done psychedelics, but I haven't tried the toad. But I don't even need it. You know what I mean? I don't need no stimulants. Like I don't need anything at this point. I've had more profound experiences completely sober, which is crazy to me. I wasn't expecting that, but I'm like, yo, I've had more. Like, if I told you my dreams, it would be fucking nuts. If I told you my dreams, it would be fucking nuts. I'm like, yo, this is what people see in the psychedelic realm. I'm seeing psychedelic visions without stimulants, which I didn't think was possible. But it very well is possible. Yeah, the ego tells you need food and sleep when you can go longer. Absolutely. That's exactly what's going on. Not your real self is telling you to be cool and achieve that state of gnosis, and the ego says, all right, you need to do this, you need to do that. If you don't eat in 3 days, you're gonna die. That's all ego. Until you prove yourself different. You gotta prove it to yourself before it makes sense. So I had to prove it to myself. I had to prove, oh, you actually don't die in 3 days. Before I proved it to myself, that was my reality. So that's, you always running from that. So that's why people eat 3 times a day, 3 times a day. You're running from that fear until you break that habit. All right. So yeah, I dream. My dreams be ridiculous. Like I'm not even going to speak on my dreams because it's like I'm conscious now. So it's like even when I dream, it's like I have control over my dreams. Let me see if I can show y'all the moon right now. See if I flip the camera over. How do I flip the camera? So there's a moon right there. The quality probably is not that good, but there is a moon. So my dreams are different. Like before this, I would dream and it's like I would be like an observer of my dreams. I really wouldn't have control. Now it's like when I dream, I be talking to motherfuckers. Like really like I'm talking now. I'm like, yo, I be asking myself questions. Not myself, but you know, your dream figures is of course aspects of your own subconscious mind, you know, in your unconscious mind. So I'll be fully aware in my dreams. So I'll be asking questions, you know, to receive information. I'm like, okay, well, what's this about? What's this about? What's this about? How do I get this done? How do I get this done? So I'll be having full blown conversations. I'll be just talking to motherfuckers. Sometimes they be looking at me like they surprised that I'm talking and shit. I'm like, yeah, I'm aware. You know what I mean? So like even the dream figures be like, yo, they be kind of shocked. I didn't had every type of reaction. Some people like literally just answer the question straight out. Then some people was like, yo, they don't even have an answer for me. They just give me some bullshit answer. So yeah, it's really interesting at this point. I mean, the dream figures don't even be expecting you to be conscious. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. So yeah, if you want to increase your awareness in your dreams, you have to activate sleep deprivation, right? You have to go through sleep deprivation to be more conscious. Again, it's hardship. It's hardship. I realize the more hardship I endure, the more control I have when I'm in that state of gnosis. That's what I realize. So like the more hardship I endure, the more control I have in that state of gnosis. Because when I was all about being comfortable physically, then I had no control over my dreams. If all day, I'm just sitting on the couch, just researching things or just doing this or doing that, I had no control over my dreams. But because every day I'm facing challenge after challenge after challenge after challenge after challenge, now it's like I have complete control. And I'm able to go deeper than I ever been. So why it works like that, it just is what it is. What direction is the moon? Well, for me, it's east. So when I showed you the moon, that's facing the east. Just where I am in the world. It may be different for someone else, but the moon is in the east for me. What does it mean when you constantly see the number 8 or any variation of 8? 8 takes you to Saturn, which is a variation of Satan. So you're just seeing Satan. So connect with Satan. I keep noticing 666. Well, 6 is Venus. So the triple six, that's a number of the beast. But the triple six is also carbon, right? So carbon, obviously, is just another form of the devil, right? So 666 is another form of the devil, a number of the beast. So you see, it's all dark energy, but people are just afraid to go into it because we've heard all the bullshit. We've heard all the conspiracy theories. We heard all this madness about it, so we don't want to touch it. But it'd be real shit. What about 7? 7 is Neptune. So Neptune takes you to your past. You know what I mean? 7 is the most spiritual number. The most spiritual number is 7 because that's your alter ego. That's the dark side of the moon. So you can say it's Neptune, but it's also the south node, which is the dark side of the moon. That's the side of the moon that we don't see. Like I don't know how many people notice that, but we only see one side of the moon. We don't never see the dark side of the moon. So whenever you see the moon, that's always the same side. We don't ever see the dark side of the moon. We don't ever see that with our physical eyes. So the number 7 takes you to the back side of the moon, right? The side that we don't see with our physical eyes. You only can see the dark side of the moon from the state of gnosis. So that's what the 7 is about. I forgot what got you into the spiritual world. Hardship. I told you that tarot deck. I brought a tarot deck home. Then the next day I was homeless. You know what I mean? That was 7 years ago. So I had to master the streets. So I had to navigate these streets. I had to learn how to survive. You know what I mean? I had to, keep myself protected and just be on point. You know what I mean? So after that, it just became a part of who I was. So I'm not even gonna say I initiated myself. It's just I was ready to go to the next level and I couldn't do so in the environment I was in. So when I was ready to go to the next level, then that's what I had to endure. Now, am I saying is that everybody's situation? Absolutely not. Of course, you can create your own hardship. You can create your own challenge. So it doesn't have to be that extreme for you, but it has to be some type of initiation. So if you don't go through an outward initiation, then you have to create an initiation for yourself. You have to be self-initiated. So create your own initiation. Because you had to go through an initiation to even be a man or a woman. Back in the day when we had the initiations or they call it something else, the rites of passage, right? Like every man had to go through a rites of passage. Every woman had to go through the rites of passage. We no longer have that. Like, what the fuck happened when you turn 13? Would you go to high school? That's it. You just fucking go to high school. You know what I mean? There's no spiritual advancement into the spirit world. Like that has been completely removed for our culture. So you gotta plant your own initiation and go through that same experience we would have to have went through anyway. That's all. So and once you go through that initiation, then things start flowing the way that they should because you are able to mature yourself. You're able to see the world for how it is. So you're not trying to change it. You're just moving along with it by maintaining your state of gnosis, navigating the world while maintaining your state of gnosis. Because if everything is temporary, why get attached to what's temporary, right? So if every situation is temporary, there's no point of getting attached to anything. What does it mean when your Kundalini rises? It doesn't really mean anything if you're not applying it. It don't mean anything if you're not putting in no work. The purpose of the Kundalini, the purpose of it is to activate your psychic ability. That would be the purpose. The purpose is to activate your psychic ability. But are most people doing that? Absolutely not. Why? Because they don't know how to do it. So it's not a natural phenomenon. That's why I said we had to go through a rites of passage. So the rise of the Kundalini isn't a natural phenomenon. It ain't just happening on its own. You have to do it yourself. That's work you got to put in. That's why it's called the great work. The spiritual work is called the great work, and that's alchemy. That's alchemy you got to put in. Because the Kundalini rises through the 7 chakras. The 7 chakras correlate to the 7 planets, the 7 inner planets or the 7 visible planets. So that you're going through your planetary energies, your internal planets. So that's the Kundalini just hitting those planets within you or the chakra points. But again, that's initiations that you have to master. Each Kundalini point is an initiation you have to master. So it's 7 initiations or 7 seals. I'm sure you've heard of that, the 7 seals. That's what that is. The 7 seals or the 7 seals that the serpent has to go through so that you can reach that state of enlightenment. So you have to go through you got to break the 7 seals. But that's astrology, right? And astronomy. You got to master astrology and astronomy, numerology. So that's why I always talk about these things, because they directly correlate to us in your spiritual journey. So if you don't have no knowledge of what's going on, then it's not going to happen on its own. But that's why we have the tools from the ancients that we still apply in the here and now. So you have to apply the tools that we have access to. I personally feel by eating food, I have to completely exhaust my body by working out or whatever else. Just have a lighter diet. Just lightening your diet. So if you eat a bunch of madness, then you of course you're gonna feel, but you're not gonna feel like that, like eating berries, and fruits, and you're not gonna feel heavy if you're eating light. So just lighten your diet. This is a unique generation. We are studying the east, the west, dark, and the light, quantum science principles. I wouldn't say that. We've always been doing this. The ancients, we built pyramids and shit. So there's nothing unique about what we're doing now. We're just rediscovering who we are. Do you believe in a soulmate? We have many soulmates. Your soulmate is who's fucking with you at the moment, because your soul aligns. I don't feel like, because again, like, don't make no sense. If you feel like just one person that's meant for you, then what happens if that person dies or you guys don't get along? Then what? You have no soulmate after that? But that's why I don't really emphasize diet, because it's mental. That's the first law of the universe, the law of mentalism. So before we even start talking about diet, it's all about what's going on in your mind. So before we even talk about the physical world, study the 7 universal laws. So the first law is the law of mentalism. So if your mind ain't on point, then it really don't matter what you eat. Because you got vegetarians out here, you got vegans out here, but that's still stupid as fuck. Let's just be real. You still got vegans and vegetarians out here with no knowledge. That's stupid as fuck. That's spiritualist. That's on new age shit. But they ain't on no shit. So we don't have to make diet the end all be all, because it's not. If your mind ain't right, who cares what you eat? So that's why I always come with no ego. You know what I mean? So that's why I'm comfortable. Most people wouldn't even feel comfortable, doing a video like this, because they want to always show forth their best side. But again, I've already showed you guys. I've been way worse than this. Trust me, I've been way worse. So I already showed me at my worst state. So there is no ego when I deliver the message. You know what I mean? Because I've already mastered that. So it is what it is. But I report live from the streets, right? So I always report live from the streets, because that's where the shit is popping. You know what I mean? The devils, the ghouls, the goblins, the elves, those internal deities that nobody know nothing about, right? Because how could you know about them if you shield yourself from them? Most people don't even sleep on the floor. For one, most people don't even sleep on the floor. Most people sleeping on that comfortable ass bed. They don't even know the floor is too uncomfortable for them. So it ain't. How can you even be in touch with the earth and grounding yourself? Most people got springs in their beds. The springs is lead. You got lead springs that's absorbing your energy. Most people don't even know the science behind that. Like, the springs of your bed actually take away energy. It's not giving you energy, but again, most people they're not even thinking like that. So that's what I mean. Most people's lifestyle, it drains their energy. That's why they're not able to do things like this, because they don't even know. They don't have no knowledge of what's really going on. They just take everything on surface value. They're not looking into the internal mechanisms of things. So they don't even know. They don't even know. So you have to know. Because if you don't, everything starts with knowledge. That's the first degree, knowledge. From knowledge, you become wise. When you become wise, you gain understanding and clear sight about what's really going on in the world, and that becomes your culture. Your culture is based in reality, and when your culture is based in reality, you can empower yourself to equalize your reality so that you actually build instead of destroy, because you are operating from a state of God. And when you're operating from the state of God, everything that you do is divine. And when everything you do is divine, then you're able to manifest your reality from the purest state. That's supreme mathematics. So that's what I say. Most people just talk shit. Most people, that's what I'm saying. Like, most people know, but knowledge ain't enough. Knowledge ain't enough. Like, we are in times where most people are awake or woke, but I already talked about that. It's fake. Don't listen to motherfuckers who just running their mouth. Because everybody got all types of information, but that don't mean they're wise. Knowledge don't make you wise. Just because you know better, it don't make you wise. Because wisdom comes from experience. You gotta do more than know. Okay, I know that. I know what's really going on, but how are you implementing it? That's not gonna make you wise. But again, like, it's everybody got access to the internet. Anybody can Google search anything, but that doesn't make you wise because you know how to use Google. That doesn't make you wise. Wise is, what are you living? Wisdom comes from your experience, your words, your ways, and your actions. How are you living? Fuck what you know. Fuck what you can research. Fuck what you can pull up on the internet. Anybody can do that. That actually makes you dumber. You see, I didn't have to pull up shit this whole conversation. How many times did I pull out Google? Or did I just come from the top and manifest it down? See the difference? I didn't have to Google anything. I don't know. Well, let me Google this real quick. I didn't have to Google nothing. Everything I said, you see, it was already here. I had to take a break. Okay, let me see if it's already, everything I said is already there. Because when you live that, that's what you live. You only speak what you live. So when you live like that, it manifests naturally. When you put in the work to enhance your memory is vast. So they say, like, you rarely see me Googling anything. Most of the time when you see me, I'm coming directly from the top. It's already there. I already planted in my mind. It's already there, and it ain't going nowhere. Sorry, I can't donate, bro. You ain't gotta apologize to me. You know what I mean? You ain't gotta apologize. So what I'm saying, you see, I didn't ask nobody to give me anything. See, that's the thing. It's like, cause I'm not gonna ask somebody for something they don't have. You know what I mean? So that's why I'm not gonna here donate to me. If you want to donate, Cash App, I should renew. Do that if you want to. You know what I mean? Don't do it because you feel obligated. Because it's not about that. I'm giving you game because you need it. I'm not giving you game because I want something in return. Everything that I said, it needed to be said so that people understand the reality in which they're dealing with. It's just that simple. So I mean, that's when you have a pure heart. Your heart is pure. You don't need it. Again, if you're fully in the spirit, you depend on the spirit. You're not dependent on a man or a woman. So that's what it is. You know what I mean? Do it if you feel obligated. But if you don't and you can't, don't worry about it. It is what it is. You know what I mean? We're gonna still make it happen. So I'll be on here a few more minutes, then we'll check out. Cause yeah, I said what I needed to say, and I can go on forever, but I know I gotta space it out. You know what I mean? I gotta space it out, cause I literally can talk forever. Again, you guys see me talk for hours and hours and hours and hours, so I can talk forever, but I just want to space it out, cause I don't want to just overload and it's too much. So, and of course I'm outside, so I'm always, you know, staying on point. You see some dude earlier try to distract me and shit. Like, we ain't letting that happen. You know what I mean? I'm like, yeah, it was crazy. Oh, I thought you were someone else. No, you knew exactly who the fuck I was. But when you hear the words that's manifested out of my mouth, it makes them uncomfortable. That's what it is. People be uncomfortable when, again, I'm outside. Like, anybody can hear anything I'm saying. Anybody can hear it. So you see, I'm not hiding. Again, you don't see too many people outside spitting this game because they too afraid. They say that shit is inside, in the comfort of their own home, but they ain't walking around. But you didn't see me. I've been speaking this shit outside in front of everybody. I've been doing it for years. Because if you are who you say you are, like I said from the very beginning, you should not be afraid to speak the truth. If you're speaking the truth, why do you give a fuck? So you see, we're going to keep building. You see, I ain't do nothing. I just kept speaking. And it is what it is. So with that, we out.